ever wish you could ask one of the big shots about the ROI of their podcast? Well, I did, and he told me he didn't know and didn't care. Seriously, because for him, podcasting was the base layer of a multi-stage media visibility plan, and he's gotten so much traction that to question it just seems absurd. Larry Sprung, founder of Midland Financial, host of the Midland Money Mindset podcast, author of Financial Planning Made Personal, and host of 2 YouTube channels, Midland Financial Inc. and Larry Sprung CFP, joins us with his 20 plus years of experience as an advisor and dishes some excellent advice on business and, of course, podcasting today. You get to hear about the lengthy planning process that led up to his podcast launch. No, he was not someone who launched a show in 30 days or less. He shares about how his content has quietly shortened his sales process, and hint, that's why he doesn't care about the ROI, and how getting on camera and behind the mic was part of a much larger plan that is only halfway implemented at this point. So there's more to come for his brand, which is really, really exciting. If you've already decided that you just got to get out there, but you're trying to figure out how, when, how often, which channel, and in which order to tackle all of the online marketing stuff, this episode will help unpack the confusion for you. Larry's straightforward approach to planning well, outsourcing production, getting recordings done, and then making changes as you go based on what you do or don't like is as attainable and accessible and as straightforward as it gets. Welcome to Podcasting for Financial Professionals. I'm Virginia Elder, founder of Podcast Abundance, where we help you use podcasting to market your business, to increase your authority, to get more eyes on your practice, and to capture leads for your business. If you're an investment advisor, tax strategist, business finance sleuth, or wealth management professional who wants your podcast to actually support growth, not just create content, you're in the right place. I made the podcast conversion blueprint just for you. It walks you through exactly how to turn your listeners into clients using a simple framework you can apply right away. The link is in the show notes. Here we go into today's episode. Larry, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Pleasure to be here, Virginia.
I know that I've followed you for a while, but for the folks listening who may not know who you are, just tell us a little bit about your business, your team, and how you operate today.
Yeah, so like you probably heard in the intro, I'm Larry Sprung, founder and wealth advisor at Midland Financial. First and foremost, I'm a husband to my wife, Denise, and father to my boys, Jeremy and Zach. And I just so happen to have this business called Midland Financial, where we provide wealth advisory services, and we work with families to find joy on their money journey. So our team, as it stands today while we're recording, is a team of 7. Myself as lead advisor, have another advisor, 1 relationship manager, executive assistant, chief marketing officer, who happens to be my wife, and an administrative assistant. And we're actively adding to our team. That's why I say as of today, while we're recording, we're at 7, but we are proactively looking to grow the team. And the firm's been around 21 years. It's going on 22 this year. And about 5 years ago, which I'm sure we'll get into, which coincides with the launch of my podcast, we made a concerted decision to really morph into Midland 2.0. I was a lifestyle practice for about 20 years or so. And at that point, decided that we were going to make a change and really create more of an enterprise as my oldest son went to college and my younger son left home at the age of 15 to follow his hockey dreams and went to boarding school. So we had a lot more time on our hands and really made a concerted effort to lean into Midland 2.0. And we're right in the middle of that transformation as we speak.
Okay. So I did look back in the archives for your podcast, and I did see that you started it in October of 2020. That was, high time for podcasts because we all just were kind of stuck at home. So you're not alone in that. But where I think your approach may be unique is this whole Midland 2.0 vision. So what else can you unpack from that plan? Maybe we can see a few of the pieces of evidence out there today of what you've been looking at and doing for the past 5 years, growing that. But what else was part of that plan that maybe we can't see or can't see yet?
Yeah. So in fairness, although the podcast launched in October in 2020 in the midst of a lot of other podcasts, it was something that we had on the table and been working on for about 12 to 24 months. So we had it planned. We got delayed somewhat because of COVID and getting equipment and whatnot, and learning what we were going to do and how we were going to go about it. So it just so happened that we launched it in this midst of a lot of other shows being launched. But it also coincided, like you said, with this Midland 2.0 launch. And really what it was is a concerted effort to really provide value and benefits to people who are out there who are interested in learning more about, wealth management and bringing joy to their money journey. So in addition to having and launching the podcast at the end of 2020, shortly after that, I did release a book, Financial Planning Made Personal, started actively getting involved with media appearances, subsequently launched a YouTube channel. And, it was just really this whole marketing effort that revolved around getting our name, getting our brand out there, and sprinkling the joy, if you will, out into the universe to try to raise awareness around this kind of concept that money doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be not fun. It doesn't have to be all tough conversations. There can be joyful conversations. And we basically brought that all to the forefront, starting with that launch of the podcast in October 2020. And things just kind of snowballed from that point on with regard to some of those other media.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for kind of pointing out there's a few lessons that I'm hearing, even though we're talking about back in time at 2020, right? Like it seems both like yesterday and like a really long time ago. But a lot of folks might, let's say they have a book in mind or a podcast or whatever it is, but this initiative to get the business out there. And there's this tendency to kind of look around and go, well, everybody's doing that. How am I going to stand out? Maybe I shouldn't do this. Or there's a lot of chatter in our minds sometimes about what everyone else is doing. And it may be circumstantial. It may just be because you're aware of the thing now. And so you're seeing, oh, they have a book and they have a book. And then, how am I going to stand out? But the other piece that stood out to me is that you had been working on this for 12 to 24 months, regardless of the delays from COVID. But there is a misconception out there in the market where I'll even get calls sometimes, I'm ready to launch a podcast. How fast can we have this up? Mm-hmm. Okay, let's back the truck up and have more of a conversation around your purpose, your perspective, the language, the messaging, who you're trying to reach. I mean, there's so much involved in that. So I kind of want to give you a moment to unpack that planning period a little bit or maybe what you felt in that COVID, time bubble there as you had been working on this. And then you're seeing all these other shows launch and you're like, well, we're doing it anyways.
Yeah. I'll start with the end question first. I mean, it didn't really deter me that there were so many people launching podcasts at that time because, and you probably know the statistic better than I do, Virginia, but there's some statistic around like the average podcast basically ends after like 10 episodes or something
Or
like that.
less, yeah.
Or less. And, as you get longer out, less and less. So I was not doing this for 10 episodes. I wasn't even doing it for the short term. It was something that I wanted to do long term. So I knew I would be in the top 1% of all podcasts if I just stuck to my guns. So it didn't really bother me that it was a crowded field because I knew that within a very short period of time, it wouldn't be as crowded. So I just continued down that path. In terms of the preparation, you're right. You have to do the preparation up front. You can't just, I think those that call you up and say, hey, I want to launch a podcast tomorrow, and then they just do it. Chances are they're going to fizzle out within those 10 episodes, and they're going to be another statistic. But we were very mindful. I started out thinking that I was going to do a podcast where I was going to speak about a topic and go over that. And basically, I recorded our first episode, which was about where the Mitlin name came from, our firm name, Mitlin. And I was just speaking for like 10 or 15 minutes. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot do this weekly or even bi-weekly and speak for 30 minutes or so and not have somebody on the other end. So I immediately pivoted to an interview style show, felt a lot more comfortable, a lot more engaging. So it's things like that, just learning. And then you want to refine the craft. I mean, one of my first guests at the time, it was Ron Carson from Carson Group. Then we redid his episode a couple of years later. I think he was my first or second anniversary guest, or maybe it was, he might have been my 100th episode guest. And we redid it. And I started listening back to that episode, the first one that we did, in anticipation of recording the second one. And I was like, oh my God, that was god awful. And I even apologized to him on the show about the intro that I did for him because I felt it was that bad. But, you can learn and develop. And I think those are the things that you have to do and want to do to improve, the process. And, we're constantly improving. We had conversations just the other day about how we can even elevate and improve it further. It also took some time. Our last question that we ask every guest is, what did you do today that brought you joy? There's a great story around how we came up with that, but that's been a unifier that we've kind of drawn in guests as a result of that, because they really light up wanting to talk about what brought them joy. So I think it has to be something that you're willing to develop and grow, and you have to learn and get better and consistently and constantly improve. And that's what I've always tried to do with the podcast to improve it. And then, utilizing that as a platform to delve into some of these other areas that I mentioned earlier.
Quick question. Is your podcast actually bringing in clients or just downloads? Those are two very different things. If you want your podcast to generate leads for your business, you need more than great content. You need a conversion strategy, which is exactly why I made the podcast conversion blueprint. With this free download, you learn how to structure your episodes, what to say in your call to action, and how to move listeners into your pipeline for your business. If you want to start growing your business with podcasting, grab the link in the show notes and download the podcast conversion blueprint today. Yeah. Okay. So share with us the joy story, because I do see this throughout your branding. I've noticed that on your email signature. I mean, it's everywhere. The word joy, and a lot of times it's in all caps. So share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah. So when we were in that process of looking to launch the podcast, my wife, who I mentioned earlier, is our chief marketing officer. She came to me and said, Larry, we need a question that's going to tie in all the guests. You ask each guest on every episode. And I was like, listen, you're the marketing person. come up with a question and let me know. And about a day or so later, she came back and she goes, I got the question. It's, what did you do today that brought you joy? And I was like, sounds good to me. And we started asking that, and people started lighting up when we were asking that question. They really enjoyed answering that question. And then essentially we had shirts made up with that question on it. And my family and I were down at Disney, and we were online for Rise of the Resistance. And if you've ever been on that ride, they're in very, strict character. They don't break character. And the gal who was up at the front saw my shirt. Well, I didn't know this, but she just blurted out to me, I ate a bag of Hershey Kisses. And I was like looking at her, I'm like, what? And then I look back at my family, and my son's like, hey, dummy, she's answering the question on your shirt. And, that was really when we knew we had something. And then as I went to walk through airports, people would stop me to take a picture or answer the question. Or at a conference, people wanted to take a picture of the shirt or ask where they can order it. We knew we were onto something. And then we started asking families that we work with that question in discovery meetings, and they started lighting up, telling us about things. So we knew we were onto something. And then basically we just used that, which was something we found through the development of the podcast. And now we've basically incorporated it throughout the entire business and the entire practice. So it's, commonplace.
Okay. So I like how this, maybe it started out as almost like an experiment, or, hey, we're going to try to have this thing that unifies all the episodes, no matter if the guests are from here or there, whatever type of guests they are. And it really caught on. So that's kind of just a stroke of luck, but it's also, there was some intention behind it, and it worked. And if it didn't work, I'm sure you would have made adjustments and gone from there. The other piece that I'm hearing is you did start out thinking, I'm going to do a solo show. Maybe that, someone you saw was doing that, or maybe you were advised to do that, but you did not like it and you switched immediately. Because that's another question I get all the time is like, well, do I do a solo show? Do I do interviews? How often? Typical podcast questions is like, what do I do? And they're looking for me to give them instruction. So your experience there kind of created your path. Is there anything you want to elaborate on as far as solos versus interviews, styles of show?
I listen, there's benefits and disadvantages to each, and it's your show. So you got to do what's comfortable for you. And it clearly wasn't comfortable for me to think about, sitting in front of a camera and a mic talking about whatever topic for 30 minutes or so. And it was something that I learned very early on, thankfully, but I love the interview style. It's just something that suits me better. I feel more comfortable. You just have to be flexible and willing to change. And, one thing I didn't mention before is when we started and we launched the show, we launched every other week. When we launched in October, we were doing every other week. And my oldest son at the time said, hey, Dad, you're going to lose people. He's like, people aren't going to wait for you for 2 weeks. You got to go weekly. So come January, we changed to weekly, and we saw some significant increases there. So you have to be willing to adapt, and you have to do what's most comfortable for you. I was able to do the weekly, so that was fine. If you're not somebody, you're better off doing every other week than every week and not being able to fulfill that obligation and being late and not having the episodes ready, all those things that could be problematic. But I think, you have to do what's most comfortable for you. It's your show, and, you can design it however you want.
Yeah, I like that. So, okay, your kids, obviously your wife is working in the business. She's your CMO. But it sounds like your kids have had a ton of influence in, what's on your shirt and, hey, Dad, and, you got to go weekly, things like that. I think sometimes folks are almost afraid to involve their family or like hesitant to. Share a little bit more about maybe the kids' ages or other ways that they helped influence the way that you've created this business.
Yeah, so my kids, as they stand today, are 20 and soon to be 23. So, they've been with me every lockstep, from the very beginning with the business. So they've seen it, when we're a lifestyle business, growing the business, launching all these things that we've discussed. And quite frankly, they're dialed in. They're the same age group as many of our clients' kids and grandkids who are going to be inheriting a great deal of wealth from their, older generation. So taking in their feedback and input is like having my own feedback to what those families may be experiencing. So they've been involved with the business from the very beginning. They've been, grew up with it. And, they understand what we do and how we do it. Obviously, now much better understanding than they did when they were, in single digits and teenagers. But, my older son's going into audit at PricewaterhouseCoopers in a couple of months. So he understands wealth management. He's been exposed to it from me in other areas. So it's just having that other perspective. Do we do everything that they say we should do or everything they suggest? No, but there are good ideas and good things that I think we have incorporated over time for sure. And quite frankly, they're my why. And, they've been a great, not that it's a tool, but we've been told by some of the families that have been attracted to our firm that one of the reasons why they're attracted to our firm is because of the family time that we spend with our kids and the experience that they've had meeting our kids and seeing how grown up they are and well-rounded. And, they feel like if we could raise kids like that, my wife and I, that we could be good stewards of their family wealth. So they've helped us build the practice as well by just being good humans, which bodes well too. So they've had a lot of influence in the business, and they're around it just as much as my wife and I are.
Yeah. I really like that. My kids are a bit younger, but there's all this scribble on my whiteboard behind me. And, sometimes I have cat drawings and things like that. But they do have interesting perspectives sometimes. And I may or may not do what they suggested, but it's always fun to see what they think and how they can help and all of that. So, and I do think it makes you a better business owner when you have a completely different age level of advice coming at you, whether it's intended advice or not. I think it makes you explore other perspectives and not just be in this silo making decisions all the time. So.
And that's one of the reasons why we have an advisory council at the firm. So we have an advisory council of 21 folks. It's almost half men, half women exactly. And they range in age from, early 30s all the way up to 70s. So gives us a wide range of perspective. We meet every 6 months and we run different topics and ideas by them to get feedback to see what their thoughts are. So it's very similar to what we're talking about with regard to the kids and just on a client or families that we serve level, getting their feedback directly too.
Oh, very cool. So, okay, the advisory council, when did you start that? I don't think that's something I've heard very many advisors doing. And who makes up this council?
Yeah, so the council started when did it start? May, it's going to be a year old. So May of 2025, we had our first meeting. It's made up of 21 families, a representative from 21 different families that we serve, half men from the families, half women. And then, like I said, aging ranges from early 30s all the way up to 70s. And we have a very curated agenda that we go through every 6 months. We usually get some takeaways from each meeting, and then we keep them in the loop as far as how we're implementing those things that we've been or committed to implementing over the next 6 months and giving them feedback. And then we meet every 6 months to kind of give them an update and then develop what the priorities may or should be for the coming 6 months. So we get a lot of feedback and a lot of great insight.
So What kind of things do you run by this advisory committee? Is it operations items? Is it marketing items? Can you give me some examples?
Yeah, it could be all of the above or any of the above. I would just preface this by saying that if anybody's thinking about doing this, do not ask any questions to your advisory council that you're unwilling to change. So, do not ask them about something that you're unwilling or cannot change, because ultimately you're not going to be able to deliver on that. So you want to keep the agenda tight to things that you're genuinely curious about. You're genuinely willing to change and amend how you do it if it's going to make a better experience for the families you work with. So that could be operational driven. It could be marketing driven. It could be meeting driven. Last advisory council, we came away with families wanted to have more family meetings. So we started developing a process for family meetings to meet with mom and dad and the kids to kind of get them in the loop as early as age 15. We've done things. One thing that came out of our advisory council was, we didn't have a notary at our office, and people felt, like when they needed something notarized, which wasn't that often, that they would have to go to their local bank, not be able to come to our office to take care of it. And then sometimes when they go to the bank, they get hassled by the people in the bank about why are they signing this? What do they need? Where are their monies? So we immediately took that feedback. It was great feedback. And within 2 months, we had somebody in our office get their notary exam. So now we have a notary at the office. So it's things like that just make the experience better and elevate it. And, sometimes it's as easy as, looking at a notary, and sometimes it's more challenging that you have to really develop, some additional processes or procedures to ensure that you're delivering on the things that are wanted or that you committed to implementing.
So you created this live feedback loop, room of 21 people who can give you feedback, vote on things, advise you of what they thought their experience would be improved by, things like that. Whereas some folks are using, surveys or forms or a few quick questions during our twice a year meeting or whatever it is. So I really like that idea of it being this like larger formalized meeting, and how you've done such a good job of spreading out, ages, genders, types of families, I'm sure, just to be able to create some strong feedback for yourself and for your group.
That's right.
I want to kind of take us back a little bit to, pre-book, pre-show, pre-podcast. And, the typical advice out there, if you ask somebody, if you had to start over today, what would be different? What would you do different? And a lot of people say, I would have started on media sooner. I would have gotten on camera sooner. I would have written my book sooner. There's a big piece of me that says, well, yeah, but if you could have, you would have. So there's things behind the scenes that become in place that we may or may not recognize at the time that allow us to then get on camera, to write the book, to do the thing, right? So I'm curious if you now, looking back, can pinpoint what were some things that happened, in the business with the team or the structure or just anything like that that has allowed you to have that Midland 2.0 vision? Because we always look at like, oh, the book changed my business. The podcast changed my business. Here's this big marketing voila that changed my business. But it's actually stuff that happened before. What are your thoughts?
I don't see that. I don't take that kind of stance in terms of this one thing changed the business. Really what it was a distinct mindset shift and change in our mindset on how we were approaching the business heading into 2020. And really the mindset shift was, prior to that, we were a lifestyle practice, had 2 stakeholders, pretty much 3 at times. And we wanted to be small because I wanted to be able to be spending time with the family, my boys, as they grew up. And then we had this event where my oldest son was going to college. My younger son was leaving the house for boarding school. And we were seeing this tremendous opening of time because we didn't have to run with them to practice and we didn't have to do this or that. Now, granted, we were on planes a lot on Fridays going to see my youngest son or watch him play in the Midwest, but we still had a lot more time than we had before. So we had this mindset shift that now was the time to really turn from a lifestyle practice to an enterprise practice. So it was really, really intentional that we made that mindset shift. And that's where the podcast started coming in and other things. So I guess to answer your question, one thing we wanted to do was really start activating different medium, whether that was podcasting, the book, YouTube. I mean, I've been on YouTube for probably 15 years. If you go back, it's almost embarrassing what my YouTube videos look like when I first started recording them to where they are today. But that's a story for another day. But we wanted to lean into that, the book, the podcast, the YouTube, and we knew that that would help, drive business and drive towards this enterprise. So I think that that was one piece of it and really leaning into that. The second piece of it was implementing some of the strategies of what I call who, not how, which is from Dan Sullivan, and really figuring out and, being process oriented, and instead of figuring out how to do things myself, find a who that could do it, because I could figure out how to do certain things, but is that really the best use of my time? Like, for example, when it came to the podcast, there are a lot of people out there that feel like they could probably record and produce and edit and put out the podcast, and they probably can. The reality is they probably can. But in truth, how much time is it going to take them to do that versus hiring somebody like you or another firm to help with all those avenues and just step in, record the show, and walk away from it and know that the episode's going to be going out on time, edited, fully done and ready to go. So I think you have to start doing that and figuring out where your unique ability lies, another Dan Sullivan term, and try to figure out a way to spend as much time in that unique ability and find others that, have the unique ability in those areas that are not a good use of your time and fill in. So I really think it was like those two things coming together, and it was really intentional. It wasn't like we launched the podcast and all of a sudden we had this huge expansion. I mean, from the launch of the podcast in October 2020 to where we are today, let's call it 5.5 years later, our practice has increased by probably close to threefold in terms of team members, and we've grown by fivefold roughly in the assets that we manage for the families we serve. So we've had expansive growth in that period of time. But again, I think it was really having that intentionality that's helped us, reach the goals that we've reached and grow Midland 2.0, as I've been calling it, over that period of time.
Yeah. Okay. I really appreciate you unpacking that because, like I said, there's so many misconceptions in the space about what your marketing can do for you and which levers of marketing to pull. And, if I write a book, then, becoming that published author is like the key to my success, or launching the podcast is my key to my success. Like everybody thinks there's like one thing, but I really think it's longevity, time, right? Like let's not pretend that you haven't had this business for 22 plus years. And then, like you said, 5+ years of podcasting, several years that your book has been out. You've been on YouTube for all these years, although I know that you've put some special effort into it within the past several months. So it's not just one thing. Would you kind of help, we know you started the podcast in 2020, made some adjustments, went from biweekly to weekly. The book came up somewhere in there. And then, like I said, the YouTube channel has had some additional special focus within the past, let's just say, year. So talk to me about those steps and kind of what your intention was with each, maybe how you're using them to layer and reach more people in different places.
Yeah. I think people consume information very differently, and you almost have to be and meet people where they're at. So the podcast was the first step. YouTube, I had been on and recording videos for a long time under the firm name. And then we launched a brand new channel under my name, Larry Sprung, CFP. We launched that in August, and we've had a lot of good traction with that. And I think the book we launched in April of 2023. So that just passed 3 years. At the end of the day, I think that when we started out on this journey, we did, the phone didn't ring really often with incoming prospects. We didn't get emails or inquiries through our website. One thing that certainly changed with all these mediums, and I don't think that we would have gotten where we are today with any one of them. I think it's really this combination approach that you need to meet people where they're at and kind of be in a multi-channel approach, if you will. I think we've seen a couple of things over the last 5.5 years. One is, our phone does ring. We do get a lot of inquiries from people who have read the book or seen our YouTube channel or saw me in the media. And we get probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 4 inquiries a week through our website. And to a person, a lot of times people don't even recall, where or what ultimately pushed them over the edge to reach out. They don't know if it was the book or the podcast, but many times they've seen all of those. And then I think the last piece that I'll leave you with is, when I first started in this profession, when we met with a prospective family, it would take 2, 3, 4 meetings to get to a yes, where you were at a point where you wanted to move forward and they wanted to move forward too. Now we're seeing much greater success more quickly. Typically in the first meeting, we're getting to that decision because in most cases, whether they've been referred to us or simply found us online, they've done their research. They saw my media appearance. They saw the book. They saw the podcast. They saw the YouTube channel. They saw us on TV. So they already feel like they know, like, and trust us before they come in the door. And it's really just for them to come in and check a box that, this is the right thing for me. I'm ready to move forward. So we're not having those 3, 4, 5 meetings anymore. It's happening much more quickly because of the content and the information that we're putting out there and sharing.
Yeah. Well, and I think, not only are you signing up families faster, but there's some ROI in there that is hard to capture because it's essentially saved you time, right? Instead of you having 4 meetings to sign a family, you're having 1 or 2 because they've binge listened to your show. They've seen you on YouTube. They saw you in Yahoo Finance or whatever, So sometimes that ROI isn't necessarily like on paper in assets under management numbers.
So let's talk about ROI for a second, because I get asked that a lot. What's your ROI on the podcast? And I will tell you and your listeners the same thing I tell everybody that asks me that. And that is, I have no idea and I couldn't tell you. And number 2, I don't really care. And the reason why I talk like that is it's almost impossible unless you have somebody that says, hey, I just listened to your podcast and that's why I'm calling you. It's usually not one reason. It's the multitude or the many different multiple approach that you just mentioned. And then the second thing is, even if the business told me and the numbers showed me and the research showed me that there was no return on my investment from the podcast, specifically from the show, I would still continue to do it because I enjoy it. I enjoy having conversations with entrepreneurs, athletes, other people who are interesting, have interesting stories. So I really enjoy that. And in many cases, these are people that under normal circumstances, if I sent them an email and said, hey, could we have a conversation for 30 minutes? They probably wouldn't even respond, but inviting them on the show, they're more than willing to have that conversation. So I get conversations with people I ordinarily wouldn't have had. So those are like the two main reasons why I continue podcasting. But listen, if you're just going into it for the return and the return alone, I think you're missing the mark. And like you said, there are those ancillary benefits that don't get calculated into the return on investment calculation, if you will, directly from the podcast or anything else, that are super beneficial to having the show as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sure you saw me nodding along, but I really appreciated your answer, because in the back of my head, I'm like, I don't know and I don't care because this is worth it, but then it's like, how do you describe that worth it? Number, like, so often the financial mind is really looking for those numbers on paper, to the point that I've even created a tracker for people with like a whole bunch of ways that you could track it. But the truth of that is that it requires another person to sit down every single week and look in all of these places and pull numbers. But the core of it is, getting to do something that you're enjoying and having access to people and conversations that you wouldn't have had access to. Plus, you're able to put out media that features you as the professional. So many benefits.
I would argue that it's actually for, I do it for the guests, really. It's, it's a free commercial for them. And I just get to be on a fly on the wall during the conversation. So it's really more of a promotional tool for the guest, I feel, than for me necessarily, especially 260 episodes in, right? I would never have to record an episode again, and I can cut up what I have for years and years to come. But for that guest, that's a great opportunity to showcase their story, what they're doing, and really be able to share it with other people.
Yeah, yeah. So after all these interviews, I often receive questions around like, how do I become a better interviewer? How do I become a better host? What have you done? What have you learned? How can you advise those that are seeking that advice right now?
Yeah. So I have always been a big fan. Granted, he has changed quite a bit, but I used to listen religiously to Howard Stern. And whether you like him, love him, hate him, whatever, he's probably one of the best interviewers of our time. So I spent a lot of time listening to him in my earlier years. And, now I've even listened, even recently as I was launching the podcast, I've listened to David Letterman and, what is it, My Next Guest, and listening to his interview style there. And then just finding other podcasts where they're really good interviewers, in terms of getting things answered and maybe people avoiding questions and then asking it in a different way to get to the same place and actually get them to answer. Larry King's another one. Just listening to those folks that are really super good interviewers and listening to how they're doing it and utilizing it within your own show. If you're having an interview show, obviously, if you're going to be speaking about certain things or topics, then I would find those people that can pontificate about topics for a while and see how they handle it, that are well known for doing that, and kind of, create your own blueprint with your own personality that works for you, just using some of those, baseline kind of facts that can be helpful to, making your show better.
Okay. I like that. Just learn from the pros, do your research, find somebody you like, their style, and try, it's emulation, not imitation, right? So that's really good advice. I do want you to share with everyone where to find you and follow you. This will be in the show notes. And then we're going to end by asking you, what did you do that brought you joy today?
Okay. So in order to find me, easiest place is go to LinkedIn, look me up under Lawrence Sprung. You can find me there, and then connections to everything else that I do is connected right out from there, whether it be YouTube, whether it be, the book, whether it be the podcast, you can find everything there. So feel free to stop there, or midlandfinancial.com. Either one of those will get you everywhere that I am. And to answer your question, which is really my question, what did I do today that brought me joy? I'm going to say that I haven't done it just yet, but it is bringing me joy thinking about that I'm going to be doing it. Yesterday was my son's birthday, and unfortunately, because it was a Monday, the golf course that we normally play was closed for an outing. So I'm going to be heading out a little bit early today and playing some golf with my youngest son for his birthday, and that's bringing me a lot of joy even thinking about it, and more so looking forward to getting out of the office a little bit. It's, I'm up in the Northeast, so today happens to be one of the nicer days. The weather's been wonky over the last several weeks, months, so I'm looking forward to getting some fresh air and hitting the golf course for a little bit with him.
And that makes me happy hearing about it. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Thanks for being here, Larry. I really appreciate it. Your advice is just absolute gold, and I can't wait for everybody to find and follow you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Enjoy.
Thanks so much for listening to Podcasting for Financial Professionals. If you want your show to do more than just educate, if you want it to generate leads and bring in clients consistently for the long haul, make sure you're using the Podcast Conversion Blueprint. This free download helps you structure your podcast to attract new listeners, refine your messaging to nurture them, and capture those listeners when they're ready as your next best clients. And of course, practicing what I preach when you sign up for your free download of the Podcast Conversion Blueprint, you're going to land on my email list. Hit reply to any newsletter because I'd love to learn about your show or about your ideas for a show. I'll point you toward your next best step, whether that be light support like an audit of your show or becoming a member of the Academy, or maybe you need full service strategy and accountability like what I do inside the Podcast Conversion Lab. Thanks again for listening to Podcasting for Financial Professionals. If you enjoyed today's episode, stick around for the next few episodes because each one incrementally helps you improve your podcast.